Hey guys, it's Lizard here, and in today's video I'm going to be explaining the main reasons why you're messing up your Telly bridge. I'm going to be covering most of the mistakes that a lot of new Telly bridges make, as well as things that more experienced players still end up doing, and bad habits and all that kind of stuff. If you do end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing because we're so insanely close to 6,000, but with that being said, let's get into it. Before I get into the common mistakes, I want to first talk about things that new Telly bridges tend to do and mess up, and they might not even realize. Now, to start off with a really good example, the best one I can think of is that they don't tap W. Now, a Telly bridge is only fast because you're turning almost 180 degrees, tapping W to gain a lot of momentum really quickly, and then continuing on with your bridge by turning around and clutching underneath yourself. If you're not doing the W tap in a Telly bridge, essentially all you're doing is a jitter bridge, or probably something even slower. And if you're not tapping W, chances are you're also not turning enough. You're supposed to turn about 135 degrees from facing backwards to facing forwards, so it's not a 180 degree rotation, but it is pretty close. If you can turn this much and tap W, you'll be able to do your tellies properly, and then you can continue on. Now, another thing that new players tend to do that completely ruins the whole premise of the Telly bridge is that they turn too early when they're jumping off of the island. Now, the reason that this is so bad is because when you're Telly bridging, you jump off of your island and gain distance towards the end before you've actually placed any blocks and before your timer has started. If you turn around too early, you don't have enough momentum to get off of the island, and the distance you're covering in that time when you start drag clicking is not going to be enough to make up for the time lost. Essentially what I'm trying to say here is it makes it a lot slower and you shouldn't do it. But now let's take a look at something that's super common that even experienced players tend to mess up a lot of the time. And this of course is holding your spacebar. Now, holding your spacebar actually does work for Telly bridging, and you can do the exact same movement and perfect it the same way. The only issue really is that it's a little bit slower, and you won't really notice the time difference if you do like 1 or 2 tellies, but after a couple more tellies, it starts to become more and more noticeable. Now, to be honest, I'm actually guilty of this myself, and the reason for this is not that I hold space, but that I have bad timing. Now, this is actually quite common amongst most bridgers, that you'll mess up your Telly bridges every once in a while because you tap your spacebar at the wrong time, and therefore it doesn't save you any time. I tend to do this quite a lot just because it's a force of habit, because I started off learning my Telly bridge while holding space, which I don't recommend. That was definitely a big mistake that I think I've learned from, and I think a lot of other people should take into consideration when they're learning how to Telly bridge. If you hold your spacebar, it's going to create a bad habit, whether you want it to or not. Just don't do it. So now let's say you've mastered your Telly bridge and you want to take it a little further, and you want to make sure that you get that perfect jump off of your island. What you're going to want to do is learn a late telly, and probably a 6-block late telly at that. A super common mistake that people make when learning 6-block late tellies is that they actually place a block on their island, which of course is really bad, because the idea with the 6-block late telly is you're placing your blocks of course as late as you can, and when you place this block on top of your island, it starts your timer earlier than you'd like it to and saves you less time. Now, this is a mistake that no matter how good you get, you'll probably end up making anyway. The only things you can really do to prevent it are just practicing it, the muscle memory down to the best of your ability. Now let's get away from the start of your Telly bridge and actually look at something that happens more in the middle of your tellies, and usually happens when you're chaining a lot of them in a row. It's actually quite uncommon, but what can happen is that you're actually over-rotating when you turn back to place the blocks, which of course will throw off the angle that your character is walking backwards across them, and will mess up your aim entirely. Obviously the main issue here is that you're going to fall off your bridge, and even if you manage to stay on your bridge the whole time while over-rotating, you're probably actually going to slow yourself down by a little bit. And obviously it's just very inconsistent, and you don't want to get this in your muscle memory, so you want to make sure you're eliminating it as soon as you notice this is starting to happen. You can also do things like turn down your sensitivity, or just practice moving your mouse a little less, and that way you'll be able to rotate just a little bit less. Now, playing off of this point, another thing you can do is actually mess up your turn on your way back to face away and tap W. The issue here is that if you turn and tap W too early before you've turned the full 135 degrees, what's going to happen is you're going to fall right off of your bridge. The reason for this is that if you turn something like 90 degrees, you're going to be facing directly sideways, and so when you tap W, of course you're going to slide off of the one block you're standing on. This is easily preventable by upping your sensitivity just a little bit so that the flick is a little bit easier for you, or of course just adjusting to move your mouse a little bit more every time you telly. This is something you're probably going to run into quite a lot early on, but not so much once you're experienced. It's really something that gets eliminated mostly with muscle memory, but if you do find that it is still happening to you after you already know how to Telly bridge, it's a good idea to just stop what you're doing and just practice doing the flick with your wrist for a couple of minutes straight. And believe it or not, everything I've mentioned in the past couple of minutes actually happens quite a lot more than you think, and it's so important that when you're bridging, you look out for these mistakes so that when you make them, you know how to fix them, instead of just sticking with them and creating habits of your own. But there actually is still one more thing that I haven't mentioned, that every single Telly bridger has made the mistake of doing. And this, of course, is learning how to tellybridge. Of course, I'm only kidding. If you're into bridging, it's a great method to learn. But with that being said, that is pretty much every single mistake you might be making while you're practicing your tellybridges, and hopefully I helped you out with being able to fix them. But if you do have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer them to the best of my ability. So if you did end up enjoying the video, please do consider subscribing. It really does help out so much with the channel, and I really appreciate it. But with that being said, I really do hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.